Hi, Ellen. Welcome. Now that we have the recording started, let's go ahead and jump right in. So I want to once again thank you all so much for joining me today. I'm going to start by sharing my slides. And today's webinar is the CELT eLearning Teaching with Student-to-Student Collaboration using Teams video conferencing in BlazeView. My name is Brian Fitzgerald, and I'm the training specialist with the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching and the Center for eLearning here at VSU. So I know that many of us have been here for all of the webinars this week, but for those who haven't been, I want to clarify that this is one of a three-part series that CELT eLearning has put together for the Teams transition. So this webinar is about student-to-student collaboration. I had a webinar yesterday on active learning using Teams video conferencing in BlazeView. And I also have another webinar tomorrow on the sort of main pieces of information that you need as we transition from Blackboard Collaborate Ultra over to Teams video conferencing in BlazeView. Now this webinar tomorrow is the same webinar that I ran on Tuesday, so if you attended that one, you don't need to attend tomorrow, it's the same thing, but because it has so many critical pieces of information, I wanted to make sure to offer it another time. All right, if you, for whatever reason, are unable to attend any of these trainings, I want you to know that they'll be offered several more times before this sort of transition wraps up. And specifically, we've already scheduled them in August, so you can register for those in the employee training portal right now. And then finally, this recording and all of the materials that I'm sharing and everything that we've sort of developed to help faculty guide them through this transition is going to be posted and available on BlazeView 101 in Module 3 under Browse Our Webinars. So you'll be able to find everything there. Okay, so with that all said, I want to turn our attention to the topic at hand, which is, as we've noted, student-to-student collaboration. So that went backwards instead of forward. Here we go. So what exactly is collaborative learning? And this is a definition from I forget what their CETL's called at Cornell. I think I wrote it down. The Center for Teaching Innovation at Cornell University. They say collaborative learning involves two or more students working together and sharing the workload equitably as they progress towards the intended learning outcome. There are a lot of benefits, as we will see, to incorporating collaborative work into our classes, and we're going to discuss those here shortly. But there are also some challenges, and faculty who've attempted to incorporate a lot of student-to-student collaboration will likely be familiar with some of these challenges. And so what I wanted to do to actually begin this workshop is to have small group discussions with your colleagues from across campus about your experiences with group work and student-to-student collaboration. So I'm going to set up some breakout rooms right now, and we're going to go ahead and just jump straight into those. So I'm going to set up 4 rooms automatically. You'll see on the slide that I've shared that I'm going to name all of these rooms after some different members of the animal kingdom here. You'll be able to see your team name on the top of the breakout room once you get into it. So we've got the rattlesnakes. I've got the grizzly bears. Just a second as I sort of rename all these here. The yellow jackets. And one last one, which is going to be the hammerheads. Here we go. Okay, so once I send you into these breakout rooms, you'll be able to see that you're in a named group, and that's going to be the name that we'll be using for the rest of today. I like to use these animals in part because it's actually just a fun story that at a trivia night about 10 years ago, we were asked for a team name for our trivia, and my wife just blurted out the rattlesnakes. And so for about the last 10 years, every time we've needed a team name, I've been on the rattlesnakes team. And so we went with animals today. But what's interesting about this, and the reason that I bring it up and took the time to actually name these groups, is that this kind of thing is actually kind of important, because it can help create group cohesiveness and actually improve the quality of group work. Right now, ideally, I would have let you all chose your group name, right, and sort of that's is it. I just is that really not a rattlesnake? That's funny. It's not my expertise, but when I searched in PowerPoint on the internet for rattlesnake pics, that was the one that came up. So that's embarrassing, but also quite funny. Mitchell rattlesnakes, yeah. We see some fans. Hopefully, you got put into the rattlesnakes. But if nothing, all of these are sort of dominating from within their own sort of different group there. But yeah, the research shows that people can actually latch on to little things and sort of make them feel more connected to other people who share that, even if there's like a minimal group hypothesis where you can actually put people into groups based on flipping a coin, like purely random chance, and they'll end up supporting members of their groups over out groups. Very strong. Uh, it might just the rattle might be out of the shot there. I could have picked a better image, but in any case, I want to go ahead and jump into these discussion groups, and I've got some prompts for you. They're up on the screen right now. I'm going to go through them very quickly, but I'll also be sharing those. So I'll make an announcement as soon as I put you into groups, and so you'll have them in your sort of in your breakout room chat. Then these can guide your discussions. So. The first prompt is what emoji best describes your thoughts about incorporating long-term group projects into your classes and why? And I want to point out that if you're not sort of super familiar with emojis, if you go into the chat, which is open, is available in the sort of top bar, there's a chat button if you don't have it open currently. Below where you would type a message, there's going to be like a little smiley face icon. You can click on that, and that gives you all the different emojis that are available in Teams. That'll be handy here coming up. And you can use those to actually express with the other people in your group which emoji you would pick. The second discussion question is, what is the biggest benefit to incorporating student-to-student collaboration in your course design? And then finally, I want you to discuss what's the biggest challenge that you've had incorporating student-to-student collaboration in your course design. So I'm going to go ahead right now and just put you into these breakout rooms. We'll do that for about 8 minutes, and then we'll come back and debrief afterwards and kind of share out what your guys' findings were. So I'm going to send you off into your groups right now, and then I will share these prompts in the chat.
And we're out.
Deborah, can you hear me? Because I have one quick question for you.
Yeah, I can.
Are you worried, not at all worried about violating FERPA with that? Or do you take off all the student information? Or
I don't know how I would be violating FERPA for them reading each other's papers.
Yeah,
in a
or
draft?
evaluating each other's papers or anything like that?
Not evaluating, just they're reading and giving feedback, so they're editing and
Okay.
Yeah. But no evaluation there. I mean, they give their thoughts.
Right.
But I also have strict rules about like that they don't have to listen to each other. They have to, be the author and decide what edits they choose.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, welcome back. I popped into all of these different discussions and heard some really wonderful conversations. And one of the things that I want to do now, and it's really important when you're using breakout rooms, especially when you have like these little one-off sessions rather than kind of longer-term group projects, is that after you send people out into a breakout room, that when you come back, you actually debrief what it is that was happening during that those conversations in the breakout rooms. So what that means is coming back together and kind of sharing out your findings with the larger classroom community. So we're going to do that now, and I want to actually start with the emojis. So I thought this was really fun. I have access to all of the different emojis because I can see all the different breakout room chats, but I want to have everybody see the different sort of reactions from across the board right now. So if you can, in the chat right now, go ahead and find the emoji that you used, or maybe it changed subtly with the discussion that you had. And let's go ahead and share those out there and get one nice big record of everybody's sort of emoji reaction to incorporating collaborative work into their classroom. All right, so lots of very good reactions here. It looks like Kathy's a big fan. Kathy's a fan. I've seen some frustration from Deborah. Can resonate with that. So you get some different mixed emotions, right? Lots of sort of positive affective emoji responses, and then some that are perhaps more indifferent. It's not always immediately clear how to interpret all of these, but definitely some from all sort of ends of the affective spectrum there, both positive and negative. If let me actually ask Jennifer, how should I interpret this sort of blank face that you have here? I see a few of them.
Neutral. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. AJ, is that what you had in mind with yours as well?
I don't know. I guess for me, I'm just almost kind of like I'm waiting, for this. Oh, okay, how is this going to turn out in the end? Is it even going to get done?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like how I feel a lot of the time, in part because I recognize that there's like these tremendous values, and when it works, it's fabulous. But also, like, there are these big challenges that come to it, and we're going to talk about some of those challenges and some opportunities for overcoming them. But I think that this is a good representation of exactly what you get when you talk about group work. Is there's like, yes, I love it when it works, and then also like, man, this can be super frustrating when it goes off the rails, right? As Jamie was saying there. So you don't exactly know what to expect, Emily, correct. Wonderful, so thank you all for that. I also do want to get to these specific questions, so let me pull back the prompts here, and I'm just gonna call for a representative from the Rattlesnakes. If anybody from the Rattlesnakes wants to tell me what your responses were to this second question, which is, what is the biggest benefit to incorporating student-to-student collaboration in your course design? So I can read out in case you guys didn't catch that exactly. So the Rattlesnakes was Deborah, Sheila, Jaume, Mitchell, and Lenise.
So what was the question?
Oh, it's this the second discussion prompt. What is the biggest benefit to incorporating student-to-student collaboration in your course design? What did your guys' group discuss related to that question?
I think we got more onto the third question than we did the second question.
Well, I was going to say that for the second question, I think we were talking about peer-to-peer workshopping of papers, was
Yeah.
sort of discussion about that. And that is a benefit to students if you can figure out how to do it. And I was saying that I do it in discussion boards. I don't do it live, but I like the idea of trying that, but I don't know how to do it. So.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and I mean it's totally reasonable. Sometimes you'll have more to say about certain questions than others, um, but yeah, Jamie's saying we just did it. So that was a good example of how we can do that. I want to call on a second group now, if I can, the Grizzly Bears. There I had Denise, Kathy, Penelope, Nicole, and Fleming. If I can get one of you all to sort of recap how you guys responded to this third question, which was, what is the biggest challenge to incorporating student-to-student collaboration in your course design?
We spent most of our time on question one, but we kind of touched on the other two, just not intentionally, just as part of her overall discussion.
Okay, well, I'm happy to open it up. I know
I can jump in. I think we were to some degree talking about problems with when all the students don't participate and having to handle that.
Yeah,
Concur.
absolutely. That's probably one of the biggest things. Would anybody else, and from any groups at this point, want to sort of jump in on this last question here? Because I know this is probably where a lot of people spend time. Mitchell, sure.
Yeah, what I've thought of is everybody in here and cross disciplines. We all have classes that meet up to the last day and are filled with information up to the last day, and we don't have, depending on, I guess, of course, across disciplines, we don't have gaps that you can fill in with something new. Let's just call it something new. And so I would view this as a challenge, especially in, let's say, one of my classes. If I incorporate discussion prompts like this as part of a course, and especially if it's synchronous, online or not, if it's synchronous, what am I going to remove? What am I going to take out of that class so that there is time for these discussion prompts? Otherwise, you're just adding more effort, time and effort on the class, both on yourself and on students. So I thought was a challenge to incorporating this. As much as I like it, and much as I might want to try it, what am I going to have to pull out of a class? What information am I not going to be able to go over because I'm inserting, this looks like it could be, it could be engaging, but it could also be time consuming.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mitchell, and actually is a nice segue as we sort of transition into start thinking about some of the benefits of actually taking the time to do this, right? Because that's a legitimate concern, which is that the most efficient way to cover the maximum amount of volume of material is for you to sort of stand on stage and to just cover as much of it as you can, right? And so depending on the level of your class and depending on the sort of level of your students is going to be where you have to determine how much of that you can kind of let them do as reading or as sort of like flips, recordings or something on the side where then you're taking advantage of your in-class opportunity to sort of build these connections. And there's good value to that, but also like the extent to which you do that might change depending on whether you have sort of like brand new people to the subject in an intro level class versus higher upper division students, right? And so you'll have to be the best judge of where that balance is, but there's definitely going to be tremendous benefits to it in terms of not just how much material you cover, but how deeply and richly you cover that material, and also these other sort of skills that you can develop along the way in terms of working collaboratively and sort of gaining more diverse perspectives. So let me actually flip to that, and I thank you for that very much because it's a wonderful point. But here are some of the benefits in the literature of incorporating more collaborative learning into your classroom, right? And I don't want to spend too much time belabor the point exactly, but really thinking about some of these intangible benefits I think are really important, right? So being exposed to and increasing your understanding of diverse perspectives was something I just pointed out. But also when you actually ask employers, one of the things that they're really looking for from new employees is this soft skill set, right? And so things like preparation for real life social and employment situations is really important. And you also end up getting sort of more interaction, right? And so if you look at the way that, for example, the way that I work in my job, I'm working very collaboratively with the people in e-learning, with the folks in IT, with, the other people in the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. And so knowing how to engage with other people and work on projects and sort of complete tasks and time manage and all those things are also very important, right? And so that's not to suggest that covering the content of the course isn't, but like all of these things have to kind of come together. And so those are some of the benefits when you actually do incorporate more collaborative learning into your classroom. Now, here, I want to talk a little bit next. I want to talk a little bit about actually, oops, I'm on the wrong thing. How you can design your class for collaborative learning. There's a bit of information in this section, so I'm not going to cover everything, but I wanted to keep it all on the slides. I am sharing my slides. Yeah. I wanted to put it all on the slides, and I'm going to share these slides out so you'll be able to access this. But I want to just kind of touch on a couple of important things, right? So, for example. Where are we here? Introducing group or peer work early in the semester helps you set clear student expectations, right? And even if it's something as simple as what we did right now, where you just have like a one-off session that you're putting people into and then pulling them back out from, just during one class session, can be really helpful in terms of getting them used to working collaboratively and sharing responsibilities, and makes them know that this is going to be something that they're going to be doing throughout the term. Right, so just setting those expectations early on. The next thing that I want to bring up is actually down towards the bottom. Consider using written contracts. And I actually want to open this up very quickly. Like, if you can, use the raise your hand button if you've ever used a written contract in one of your group projects for one of your classes. I see Nicole did. Can I ask you, Nicole, can you tell us how did that go? How did it work?
I think it went well, less from the contractual side, because students are going to do what they're going to do, but it was a way of walking students through all the agreements they need to come to in order to make the group work. And a lot of things that they probably wouldn't have thought of, like, how are you going to communicate? What are you going to do if somebody doesn't respond? But all different kinds of things. It was actually maybe a 4-page contract.
Okay.
It had a lot of stuff in it, and it was a part of the process, and they had to do it and return it to me before they started. And I think it helped actually a lot when I used it. I haven't always used it. Sometimes I'm moving fast. I don't do a lot of those kind of group projects. I do a lot more collaboration on the fly, where they're helping each other write a paper and discussions and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it can really help.
Okay, I'm seeing Jamie in the chat saying you can use these contract for assessment at the end, which is a good point. Very quickly before I jump in, Ellen, and I think I saw someone else's hand. Were you guys the similar sort of response to that, or did you have a different experience?
I raised my hand. I didn't use a contract in the courses that I just taught. I inherited those when I first got here in August. However, I explained to my group when I was in my first graduate program, every single thing we did not as a group, but as a team. And so we did at some point get some instruction on, how to do it, what the roles and responsibilities were, the difference between a group and a team. And we did have contracts in some of the courses, some of them are not. But I think it worked better if you had the contract and everyone on the team knew what the expectations were at the beginning and had a little instruction on how to behave and how to get to the end point.
Super, thank you. Emily, was your experience similar to that as well?
Yeah, and one of the things that I did is I asked the students after they developed their own contracts, I asked them to later on to kind of give me an assessment of how the different people in the group performed, and it gave them, in a sense, a rubric for responding to that reflection for me. So that was helpful as kind of an benefit I hadn't foreseen. But
Yeah, wonderful. That actually jumps into one of the things that I'll get into on the next slide, which is actually assessing both the individuals and the group when you're doing that. But it sounds like there was definitely some benefit to this, and I wanted to highlight this in particular because this is actually something that Dr. Landau has developed a workshop on, which is specifically like how to sort of implement and develop these contracts for your group projects. So I throw that out there because when I send out the feedback form after this webinar, if that's something you're interested in, we have sort of like a ready to go workshop for that. So if we get a handful of people that are interested in it, we could probably put something together for that. And the research is very clear that that's a strong benefit when you're doing these group projects. And then as we just talked about, right, being able to incorporate self-assessment and peer assessment means that the students, when they're in the group project, they'll rate their own work and they'll rate the quality of the work for their group members. And that's going to be one of the tools that you'll have when you're assessing both the individuals and the group for their project, right? So we've got basically collaborative learning can sort of fall into two different dimensions, right? The size of the group that you're working with and also the duration of the group, how long that group's going to stay together. So for example, these little breakout rooms can be one-off sessions, but we can also have these sort of projects that take, 2 or 3 months even to complete, right? And so the sort of settings and the structure of those are going to be slightly different, right? So for these more one-off practices, the best practice for that is to take time before you actually put people into groups to make sure that you're introducing the task at hand and giving them sort of very clear and specific instructions about what you want them to accomplish. And then you want to make sure that you provide them enough time to actually complete the task, right? Which seems self-evident, but these things do take longer than you'd expect, especially in the online setting. And then if you're in a live classroom, you'll want to like walk around the room and sort of spot coach. In the online space, that means sort of popping in and out of the breakout rooms and making sure that people are on task and that you can address misconfusions on the spot. And then finally, what we did after where we came back from our breakout room, which was debrief. So calling on a few students to share a summary of their conclusions, addressing misconceptions, and then opening up the floor for questions is ideally what you would do. Now, what you'd want to do for a larger project is a little bit different. So, it's a little bit more in depth, right? And again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to put them on the slide so that you can access this later when you're watching the recording, or if you want to sort of pause and take a longer look at some of these best practices. But I wanted to highlight specifically organizing the groups in advance. This is something that's going to be tremendously helpful with your sort of classes where they know what their group is. You can sort of preset breakout rooms, and we'll cover that here shortly. And then finally, specifically assessing both the individual work and the overall group product when you're sort of creating assessments for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get a better sense of individual work. But the first thing was actually what we covered just a minute ago, which is allowing self-assessment and peer assessment for the members of their group. Okay, now I want to actually jump into how you can do this in Teams, in BlazeView, because that is sort of the core of what we're getting at here. And so let's take a minute to look at that. So this next thing, I want to actually walk through very quickly the steps of how you can sort of set up breakout rooms like what we just did here. I need to start with a caveat, which is that this is actually pretty difficult to show during a live Teams meeting because I can't, for example, create a new meeting and then show you how to do that live because it'll pull me out of this meeting. So I'm going to be using a lot of sort of like screenshots and just walking through. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of clear in terms of why I was doing it that way. I'm also going to take a second right now and I'm going to post the Microsoft guide for their sort of job aid for you right now in the chat, so you have access to that. If you're watching the recording, know that I'll also be posting this beneath the recording as one of the supplemental materials that I'm sharing, so you'll be able to find that there as well. Okay, so the way that you would set up a breakout room during a live session, like what I did this morning, is to actually go up to the meeting controls bar. So if you look at the top of the screen, like where you have the raise hand or the chat, if you're the organizer, you should see this icon that looks like a square in the bottom left corner of another square, and that's the breakout rooms button. If you select that, then you'll get like a little pop out that comes out just like the chat does. But there you can see you've got these options where you'll select the number of rooms that you want to create, and then you'll assign the participants. And you have two options for how you want to assign the participants. The first is either automatically, which just randomly takes everybody that's present and puts them into the number of groups evenly as possible. Or you can manually assign them. So if you have specific groups or specific people who maybe you want to keep apart or put together, you can do it that way. You can also do a combination of both, where you start with automatically assigning people into random groups, and then if you need to make small adjustments for one reason or another, you can manually move people up and down. You'll be able to find all of those instructions in that guide that I just posted on the channel. Once the participants are assigned, you can just open the room and it'll automatically send people into the room. Okay, now before I move on, I want to actually quickly make sure that everybody understood what I said, because I don't want to talk too fast as I go through some of the technical stuff. I think since I've been doing it for a while, I tend to run through it very quickly. So if you can, use the react button and just give me a thumbs up if everything that I just said makes sense and you're with me. If not, raise your hand if you have any questions or if something I just said was unclear in terms of setting up the breakout rooms. All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up. So I'm doing it in the chat. There's also just the react button on the bar on the top here, but I'm not seeing any raised hands right now. So I'm going to take the risk here of proceeding, but please do stop me if I move too quickly through any of this. Yes, Fleming, that's correct. I was able to interpret whether that was the thumbs up. I understood what they were getting at, but thank you. Okay, so let's talk about how, as one of the best practices noted, you can set this up in advance, right? So the way that you would do that is fairly straightforward. If you set up your Teams meeting, once you invite people, what you'll find is if you go into the application and then you click on the meeting date and right click on it and click edit, you'll have the ability to go in and, for example, change the time or change the date or anything along those lines. But towards the top, you also have chat files, details, whiteboard, etc. If you don't see breakout rooms listed, then what you need to do is click the plus wherever a number is. It'll be like +3 or +4 depending on how many features you're trying to incorporate. And then you'll have a drop-down menu come up and you can click breakout rooms from that. That's going to take you to a new page where it says, if you don't have breakout rooms created, like this screenshot on the bottom right hand side that I'm sharing now, you just click the Create Rooms button, and you can do this sort of before you actually get into a meeting. Once you click Create Rooms, it's going to be exactly the same as if you were already in a meeting. So you'll be able to say, oh, create, it'll ask you how many rooms you want to create and then how you want to assign people to the rooms, and you can sort of do all of that in advance. Okay. Oh, also, sorry, you have the ability to click on the settings. Let me see if I have a slide for this. I don't see it. Yeah, okay, so settings. I want to jump into this really quickly, but you'll see once you create the room, the breakout rooms, you've got this sort of ellipses bar in the top right-hand corner. If you click on that, you have the option to rename the groups. So you could do the rattlesnakes or the grizzly bears or whatever. And like I said, for group cohesion, you can actually ask students to give themselves a name, especially for longer term projects. And that'll help sort of keep them together nicely. So what I'm curious about is, like, I chose all the names for today's because of time constraints, but I'm curious how you guys would have chosen names right now. So take a second in the chat and let me know if you had the opportunity to choose whatever name you're going to be using for your group. Let me know. Jamie, that's a wonderful question, and it's one I can turn to right now. So one of the benefits, yeah, no, that's a great question. First of all, it's actually, you can just do it sort of conveniently. It saves you time during a live meeting to set it up, right? But that's not necessarily a pedagogical answer. That's more of just a making sort of the time that you have together work. The other reason specifically is that you can keep these groups together for a longer period of time, right? So let's say you have a group project. If you're setting up the meeting in advance or on the spot, it's pretty easy to randomly assign people to different groups. But if you want to have people that are working in a group over a longer period of time, building those connections and working on a larger project, it's going to be really helpful to set those up in advance. And I was going to get to this in a minute, but you can actually, it sounds like a lot of work to do this over and over and over again. And Fleming, this is exactly the answer to your question here, is these breakout rooms, for example, they definitely last the entire meeting session, but they also last if you have recurring meetings. So if when you set up your class session, you meet, every Tuesday, Thursday for an hour and a half, you can set up the sort of schedule for the meeting to be every Tuesday, Thursday from 9 to 10:30, right? And if you set up your meeting as a recurring meeting, then the breakout rooms will actually last across the whole thing. So you can just sort of open and close the rooms, and it'll automatically pull the same students back into the same rooms over a larger period of time. And again, you can sort of go in and modify that on a one-off basis. If, for example, 3 people from one group didn't show up, and it's maybe not a group work day, but you just want people to sort of work, you have the ability to sort of flex that around on the spot. But you can keep these breakout rooms consistent so that people can develop those cohesiveness and that sort of camaraderie through that sort of long-term collaboration. So a couple of wonderful questions in the chat. Thank you. I want to point out one other thing in the settings, which you can do if you set up these breakout rooms in advance. So you'll see that there's the rename, which is going to be very helpful, but then there's also the room options. And that's what you see the screenshot on the right of the slideshow right now. Now, most of these settings, I've looked through them. I don't think you'll probably have much reason to change a lot of these, except for one. And this will be sort of, you'll have to decide how you want to use this, but you have the ability to set up breakout rooms to automatically record. You can actually do this with your main meeting too, where you can change the settings so that you don't accidentally forget to record a meeting. But you can also record the breakout rooms, and you can do it automatically. So this is something, and you can frame it for the students so that they have access to go back and look at what they were talking about, or go back and, hey, what did so-and-so say during that meeting, and then go back and find it if it's recorded. It also gives you the ability, if there's, for example, like a discrepancy about what somebody self-evaluated in terms of their contribution to the sort of project and what everybody else, their peer evaluations, this gives you the ability to actually kind of go in and get pieces of evidence for that, right? So seeing where they sort of contributing in the chat, where they working on the collaborative document? Were they active during the meetings? These are pieces of evidence that you can sort of pull from. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you do this like that I'm expecting you to go in and watch every sort of breakout room. It's more for the student's benefit, but the sort of corollary benefit for you is that if there's a dispute about how you end up wanting to grade this, you have the ability to go in there and look. And yeah, so this is something that I think a lot of people were worried about, and Kathy specifically brought it up earlier, is how do you sort of measure this, right? And or how do you sort of check to see who's done what? And one piece of that evidence, like I said, is the sort of peer and self-evaluation. But then you can also add in something like recording breakout rooms and using collaborative documents where you can have like access to version history or something like that. And that's more, like I said, I'm only suggesting you use that as like if you need to go in and kind of remedy it, because otherwise it can be a lot of work and onus on you. But the big thing is if they know that it's being recorded, they're also more likely to sort of contribute and participate as well. Okay, so that's the one sort of setting I want to share. I've also got some information here on collaborative files. I do want to jump back into another breakout room. So I'm going to just share this document right here, but you can create like Microsoft collaborative files really easily. I want to put this in the chat, but I also want to get to our last sort of like group discussion here. So I'm going to put that there. We'll be happy to answer sort of questions on that. Both, I know Sheila talks about this in some of her training, so they should be available there. But I want to sort of kind of skim through this so that we can get to our last discussion here. So we're gonna go back into the same breakout room. So hopefully you'll remember or you'll be able to figure out what your title is here. And I've got a few more discussion prompts. So the first is, which of the pedagogical best practices for student-to-student collaboration have you already done and found most helpful? 2 is, what sort of team-specific technological tool or practice are you most excited about incorporating into your course in the future? So of all the things I sort of just went over, what sort of technical thing is going to help you out the most? And then how has what you learned today changed the way that you think about student-to-student collaboration? Again, I'm going to post all of these as an announcement, so they'll appear in your chat. So I'm going to send you out into breakout rooms for about 8 minutes or so, and then we'll come back right at the end for a quick debrief here. So just 1 second while I get these rooms back opened up. Landry, are you here or are you in the breakout? You're here. Okay.
Yeah, I actually went to the chat and clicked on some file, and then I kind of disappeared and I had to log back in.
Okay, let me see. I might just I'm gonna remove you from that meeting really quickly, or that group, and then I'm gonna try to pull you back into it. Just a second here.
Whatever.
Hammerheads. Okay, you might be hopefully setting over there now.
Okay.
I'm still getting like a load icon. Well, I'm not sure why it's not sending you over there. It says one or more people didn't accept the invite into the room. but it should have automatically pushed you into it. Mhm. Let me jump in there.
It has one that there's an icon up there that says join room.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting everybody pulled back in here, and we're fast approaching the end of our time. So I want to actually we're going to do a sort of quick debrief here for this last breakout room. And I want to actually specifically, I was seeing because I have access to all the different breakout rooms chats, I saw Nicole and Penelope in the Grizzly Bears right at the very end say, interesting idea, like, yes, what an interesting idea, what a great thing. So I'm very curious because I wasn't in the group as that was coming through. Could you share what was this fabulous idea that came through sort of right at the end of your discussion?
Do y'all want me to say it again?
Please.
Yeah, Fleming, that was your idea.
Okay. So we were talking about synchronous versus asynchronous, and I tend to have optional class meetings, but not required class meetings, and the rest is asynchronous. But I'm starting to consider maybe having a required class meeting at the end of each module so that it would be every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, and then offer 3 times. So everyone has to log in for one of these 3 sessions to do this thing, either with me or with other students, or both, is the way I'm conceptualizing it. But kind of a hybrid between asynchronous with optional class meetings versus just a specific day and a specific time that everyone has to get together.
Okay.
We were also talking about how that might actually be a lot more work for Fleming. And I had thrown into the chat just toward the end that my position on all this is whatever we do, it should be better for students and easier for us, not harder for us. That's no good for us, honestly, or for our students. So I was just throwing that out there as a theory of the whole online teaching or teaching thing.
I do have, in my intermediate class, I have appointments. So I set up appointments that they have to schedule to talk with me one time. And it's very difficult for some of my students even to do that because of the time differences. In that class, I've had students, last semester I had one in Bellingham, Washington, but I've had Singapore, South Korea, Great Britain, and Belgium. And just that I still do most of it asynchronously.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, and we're right at time here. So it leads me to kind of like 2 final sort of thoughts related to some of the things that we've heard today, and I'll touch on that right now, which is that a lot of the times when you do group work, one of the things that I recommend is that you sort of provide time for students to do that, and specifically that you provide in-class time. So if they're if they're sort of signing up to, and this is not true for all classes, some classes are designed to be purely asynchronous, but if you have a class that has a sort of scheduled time, one of the beautiful things about the new BlazeView Teams integration, thanks Sheila for coming, I appreciate it, is that students can actually schedule their own meetings in it. So they can set up a group meeting during the sort of scheduled class time. And so instead of maybe having everybody meet at once, you can say, okay, use this class time that everybody set aside to come meet together to join us. And that's a really helpful way because they've already sort of set that time aside rather than finding a different opportunity. And the last thing is the fact that I knew that you had this sort of great idea right at the end is because you were posting it in chat. And so one of the things that I saw during the first breakout room, this was from, I think it was the Hammerheads. Yeah. So one of the best practices that I didn't touch on, but which is on the slide, is to assign roles to different people. And so what I noticed was that during the first breakout room, Jamie was writing down notes of like, oh, all the ideas and all the different things that people were saying. And now you have this sort of log that can stay with you even after the time. Yeah, so perfect. And that's such a wonderful practice, right? And that's one of the things that I love about the chat in Microsoft Teams versus the chat in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra is it's so easy. As soon as this ends, like you still have this sort of continuing chat that just exists on your Teams app. so you can continue the conversation going, and you have this sort of wonderful record of the different conversations. So that's one of the best practices there as well. Now, I went a few minutes over, so I want to be very mindful of time, but thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this last session. I have one final request from you, if I could, which is to once again share an emoji that sort of now sums up your newest sort of thought about incorporating collaborative work into your classroom. So if anything's changed, let's end this thing with another sort of long list of emojis in the chat, and hopefully we'll get some more positive, effective emojis. And thank you all again so much. Yes, Jamie picked the same one as me. Super. I'm loving the good vibes in the chat, everyone. Final reminder that this recording and all of the sort of materials that I created, the PowerPoints, all of the job aids, everything, it's all going to be linked on Blaze View 101, so that you'll be able to access those moving forward. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for those of you who came today and yesterday and the day before and all of that. I really enjoyed the conversations that we were able to have.